press briefing, but Mulvaney has been speaking, and before that, DHS Secretary John Kelly took to the podium. While all of that was happening, we just heard words from Hillary Clinton speaking at length on the outcome of the election and what may have cost her winning the White House. We want to get straight to that. Joining me now for reaction, Simon Rosenberg, a former Clinton campaign advisor and president and founder of NDN, and Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. All right, so Simon, Matt, I want to get straight to Hillary Clinton speaking at the Women for Women International event right here in New York City, talking about she was on the way to winning, and then this happened. Listen.
But I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off.
All right, so discussing her election loss, Matt, she also added to that, I take personal responsibility for that loss. What did you make of her words?
Well, I appreciate the fact that she might have said that she took responsibility for the loss, but she fails to take responsibility for her actions. Hillary Clinton is not the president today because she too often lied, she too often broke government regulations on how she was to handle classified information in her emails, and the Clinton Foundation was by many accounts a scam to get their family wealthy. It's why she's not the president. I think there's a great chance she would have been the president if they had never set up that shakedown operation called the Clinton Foundation, and if she had simply followed the rules on her emails. The reason why the WikiLeaks became an issue, and I think it was wrong for WikiLeaks to make that information public, but the reason it became an issue is because Hillary Clinton didn't turn over her emails. And that is where this all comes down to. She has the responsibility 100% on her own shoulders.
Simon, we also just heard from the former Secretary of State talking about the military strike, President Trump's military strike in Syria, talking about the fact that she did support that. Listen.
Yes, I did support it. I didn't publicly support it because there was, that wasn't my role, but I did support it. But I am not convinced that it really made much of a difference, and I don't know what kind of potentially, backroom deals were made with the Russians.
So, Simon, she supported the military strike, but she doesn't know what kind of backroom deals were made with the Russians.
Listen, I think the issue of Donald Trump looking the other way as Russia continues to be an aggressive force around the world is a very legitimate foreign policy issue for the country. You use whatever words you want, but I mean, we see them, funding the Taliban. We see them violating a nuclear treaty in Europe. We see them interfering in European elections. We see them having a new beachhead in Nicaragua. Everywhere you look, the Russians are on the march, and this administration seems to be appeasing them at every step. I hope that this becomes a more important topic of conversation, because to me, it's equal to what's happening in Syria and North Korea as a foreign policy challenge. So I'm with Hillary on this one.
Matt?
I see no appeasement. If anything, I think many people are saying that they're surprised how aggressive Donald Trump has been, first of all, with his military action in Syria and the way that the two countries are talking to each other. There was a phone call today that I read about. I don't think we've gotten much of a readout about it yet. But the fact is this: Donald Trump has taken the responsible decisions to make sure that the Russian bear does not feel like it can go anywhere and do anything it wants. And I think that's a good development.
All right, and I also want to get to what we just heard coming out of the White House, Simon and Matt. We just heard from DHS Secretary John Kelly saying, I believe this budget will help us begin to improve the way we do business to make this country more secure. Then you saw Mick Mulvaney, the OMB director, step up, and he said if the Democrats aren't going to behave any better, a shutdown may be inevitable. Simon?
Well, it's a new administration, and, governing is really hard. And, Democrats have a seat at the table. And look, what I'm surprised about with Nick Mulvaney's tone today was that in every deal like this, both sides get something, right? And that's the way it works. And it sounds like, to me, both sides got something. I mean, he was happy about the stuff they got. Democrats are happy about the stuff they got. I don't know why he was whining so much in the press briefing today, because this is the way that Washington normally works. And frankly, Donald Trump had some significant victories that they should be proud of.
I mean, he did go, Matt, further and said Democrats wanted a shutdown. They're desperate to make this administration look like it can't function.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, let's face it, Democrats benefit from shutdowns. Republicans hardly ever benefit politically from shutdowns. I think the president is right that sometimes you need to have a shock to the system. Let me tell you, there's nobody in this country who's going to think that this budget deal helps change the way in which government does business. There's nobody who looks at this and says, oh, this is really great, government at work. The fact is that they're going to have a lot of Democrats to pass this thing, because this is very dispiriting to most Republicans.
You know, Simon, I think you just used the word whining to describe what you heard coming out of the White House, but Secretary Kelly used it as an opportunity to tout a lot of the accomplishments in the very short time that we have seen the Trump administration at work here. He said in the past 100 days, we have been incredibly successful in enforcing the law and defending the nation, and he was very stern with that.
Is that, well, clearly, you know, we've gotten partial data. I mean, usually we get data on this stuff at the end of the year. I know a lot about this border stuff, and the truth is the flow of undocumented immigrants has been plummeting for years. We've had no increase of the undocumented community in the last decade. Both parties have invested tens of billions of dollars on border security over the last decade, and it's had a real impact. So I do think that we've made a lot of progress. There is more that can be done, certainly, but I do think the administration is taking a little bit too much credit for work that was being done by others, including their members of their own party, for a very long time on these border security issues.
All right, let's get back to Mick Mulvaney, the OMB director. He's still speaking in the White House press briefing room. Matt, Simon, thank you for hanging on.
Sure.
Let's go back to the White House.
Comes back as part of the process. We're very pleased with the deal today. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always call Mr. Zartaki. Thank you very much again, and thank you for letting me have a shout-out to my wife.
Will you guys just email where that wall is from exactly so we can identify location? Appreciate it.
Sean,
Thanks so much.
please.
Hey, Sean.
Okay, well, that was clearly an upset White House press briefing room that Sean Spicer's not taken to the podium. I guess they expected after Secretary Kelly and OMB Director Mulvaney that he would be, but he did not. So we've got our political panel standing by. Matt, Simon, thanks for hanging on with us. But you did hear some moaning and groaning coming from the reporters in that room. Certainly, there's still many questions left unanswered. Spending bill is front and center. Matt, you heard over and over again from both of them, Mulvaney and Kelly, that this is not a win for Democrats, not a win for Republicans. This is a win for the American people.
Yeah, look, it's a bipartisan budget agreement because, as Mick Mulvaney said, it takes 60 votes to get this through the Senate, and Republicans do often need to be reminded that, yes, we have a majority in the Senate with 52, but we don't have 60. Matter of fact, we've never had a supermajority for Republicans in the Senate in my lifetime. So you have to deal with the other party and come up with agreements. I just think that, you know, this is the deal that makes a lot of Republicans hold their nose. It's kiss your sister time. And they better have lined up a lot of Democrats to pass this thing, because it's going to be hard for them to marshal their troops after they take another tough vote on health care this week.
And Simon, it was just several hours ago that the president tweeted this, really setting the tone for all of this, saying the reason for the plan negotiated between the Republicans and Democrats is that we need 60 votes in the Senate, which are not there. We either elect more Republican senators in 2018 or change the rules now to 51%. Our country needs a good shutdown in September to fix the mess. Simon?
The filibuster's been in place since the very beginning of our republic. It's been there for every Congress and every president throughout American history. They've all managed to deal with it. It's time for Donald Trump to buck up here and play by the rules that have been in place that have worked very well for this country for a very long time. And I also think what's interesting to me is that it's May, and this budget that we just finished this week is for a budget that was introduced in the beginning of 2016. It's 14 months after this budget was introduced. Where's the president's budget? We've never had, since World War II has ended, a president not release their budget for the coming fiscal year this late. I think the most important thing now is the president was cleaning up this sort of thing that was left for him by others. What's he going to now? It's time for him to put his own budget on the table. Let's get on with that. That's what I hope happens next week.
Don't worry, it's coming. Don't worry.
When, Matt? When?
Don't worry.
And by
Simon,
the way,
you won't like it.
I know.
Clearly,
That's
Simon
why
doesn't like it.
I'm getting ready, Matt.
Hey, Matt,
I'm ready.
real quick, were you surprised that there was no questions thrown out there from reporters in the room about the phone call with Vladimir Putin that was taking place in the noon hour Eastern time today?
It just, look, this is the era of Trump, and we have to remember there's always so many things happening at the same time that literally you have what's going on in North Korea, you have this really important, critical phone call with Vladimir Putin, which I want to know what happened on that phone call. I know we all do. At the same time, you have this budget agreement that came out. At the same time, they're trying to get the votes on health care. I don't know whether it's because Donald Trump has created so much change or that the American people are living in a very interesting political time, but it's hard to keep up.
And remember, this is the first time that the two leaders will be speaking since Donald Trump said back in April that he believed that U.S.-Russian relations were at an all-time low. So we will certainly all be curious to see what comes out of that phone call. Matt, Simon, thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Sandra.
All right, well, the president is speaking by phone, as I mentioned, with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but we have no details on that from the briefing. We're going to wait for those to come in. But the big question is, can the two men make progress on Syria, or at least on improving relations?
Right now, we're not getting along with Russia at all. We may be at an all-time low in terms of relationship with Russia. This is built for a long period of time.
Obamacare, but they still don't know if they can pass it. Peter Ducey live on Capitol Hill for us. Hey, Peter, how close are GOP leaders to being able to schedule a repeal and replace vote at this point?
Sandra, just a few minutes ago, the House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, walked by here in Statuary Hall, and I asked him, how close are you getting on health care to a vote? And he said, very close. So it does sound like leadership has a little bit more arm twisting to do, and some prominent lawmakers make it sound like they're running out of time to do it. Votes away, or a couple of dozen votes away from being able to vote on health care?
You know, hopefully we're just a handful. I think at this point there's still a lot of undecideds, but, you know, generally at this late stage of the game, the undecideds, you can address their concerns. So I think we're just a handful away.
If there's not a vote to repeal and replace this week, do you have any idea when that would be?
I don't. So let's do it this week.
And leadership got some bad news this morning. Congressman Fred Upton, former head of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which worked a lot on repealing and replacing Obamacare while he was in charge, is going to vote no. He thinks that amendments to the language of the bill are damaging to coverage for pre-existing conditions.
I'm not at all comfortable with removing that protection. I've supported the practice of not allowing pre-existing illnesses to be discriminated against from the very get-go. This amendment torpedoes that, and I told the leadership I cannot support this bill with this provision in it.
And the loss of Upton's support puts leadership right on the cliff of not having enough support to take this bill to the floor now or ever, because right now the Fox Brain Room has counted about 20 GOP members who are firm no's, and they can only afford to lose 22, Sandra.
And Peter, how are Democrats reacting to the GOP struggles at this point?
They're essentially saying that they think recent history proves that this bill will fail.
We as Democrats see very little, if any, difference between this bill and the bill that failed just a few weeks ago. The one thing that hasn't changed is that if they pass this version of their health care bill, 24 million Americans who have some form of coverage today will lose that coverage.
Democrats may not have a chance to vote against it, though, because if Republican leadership cannot get together some more of its own members to say they will vote yes on the American Health Care Act, then it's never going to see the floor anyway. Sandra.
All right, Peter Ducey, thank you. On Capitol Hill for us, Fox News Alert. President Trump talking with Russia's President Vladimir Putin just a short while ago, where they're expected to discuss a number of foreign policy challenges, including North Korea and Syria. But we have no details yet from the White House briefing. Since they last spoke, Mr. Trump ordered a strike on a military base in Syria. U.S. military intelligence showed that base was where a deadly chemical attack was launched from. Joining us now to discuss is Tara Mahler, a senior policy advisor at the Counter-Extremism Project and former CIA military analyst. Tara, thank you for joining us. We don't have any details or specifics out of that conversation between President Trump and Vladimir Putin at this point. What might have they discussed? What did that conversation, if you were to take a guess, look like?
I can speculate about what the conversation probably touched upon. What will really be interesting to see if we get a more thorough readout is the tone. I guarantee that Syria was on the agenda. What the Russians and the United States can possibly do with regard to Assad. We obviously have differences of opinions there, whether or not we can perhaps get any agreement on some ceasefire areas. Putin was trying to push some safe zone areas in Syria. I think that the chemical strike probably also came up on the call. Obviously, the United States taking a strong stand in retaliation for the chemical weapons use and Russia pushing back on that. So I think those were the two probably top items. But again, this is all speculative since there was no readout and since Press Secretary Sean Spicer did not address this in the press conference today. Other issues that could have also come up, you know, Ukraine might have been on the agenda, but it's possible Trump stayed away from that. I think Syria was probably front and center.
Well, and to be fair, Sean Spicer didn't ever step up to the podium at the White House briefing today, so there wasn't a chance for questions to be fired off at him. Meanwhile, while we wait for the details of this conversation to come out, I'll remind everyone that this is the first time that the two leaders have spoken since we heard from President Trump just a couple months ago saying he believed that U.S.-Russian relations were at an all-time low. You have seen so much change since you heard Donald Trump on the campaign trail talking about Vladimir Putin. What should be the basis of that conversation?
Well, I think it is important. You always do want to still have outreach to adversarial states. That's important. It's part of diplomacy. It's part of trying to find solutions to work together. But you also need to take a strong stand on the issues that are important to U.S. national security, to United States interests. And I think it will be interesting to see, you know, President Trump, before he was president, was fairly apologetic towards a lot of Russian behavior. And we've seen shifts in that over the past month or so, culminating in what I would say would be the Syria strike, because that's actually counter to you know, what Russia wanted in that case. And so I think it will be interesting to see the tone. Having said that, we don't always get, you know, full readouts of these calls. It's possible that there will be a short, brief description of the call saying the issue area is discussed. But it will be interesting to see how this gets shaped in the upcoming months. Also, you have, you know, Angela Merkel also meeting with Putin, and she's also obviously taken a very strong line on Russia as well.
And we've got the U.S. military now, Tara, confirming this THAAD missile defense system is now operational in South Korea. That made big news, big headlines. Can you explain to us what the purpose of that is and just kind of simply how it works?
Sure. This has been in the works for a while in terms of getting this into place. It seems that the process was sped up a bit now, mostly because of the escalating potential crisis with North Korea. Basically, the way it works in sort of layman's terms is basically it's a missile defense system. So South Korea gave us the land. Our equipment's going to be there. They're mobile launchers, so you can move them around, decide where they're going to be. And basically, that means that if certain types of missiles are launched at South Korea from North Korea, the THAAD system is able to intercept that basically upon entry as it's going to hit its potential target. It is very highly effective in its testing. Having said that, it's still possible to bombard it or overwhelm it potentially. The thing that's that's worth noting here is the reason that it's been put there now. You know, is because people are concerned that if the United States does potentially do something in North Korea, not saying we're going to, not saying we've said we definitely will, but if we do, I think North Korea will undoubtedly retaliate. And against who might they retaliate? Presumably South Korea or Japan or somebody in the region. So that's the purpose of that.
Tara, we have to leave it there, but real quickly, the president said he'd be willing to meet with Kim Jong-un under the right circumstances. Would that be a good strategy or not?
I think a better strategy, I'm all for diplomacy and talks, would be some sort of multilateral, cooperative resumption of multilateral diplomacy, pulling in states like China and getting basically, you know, foreign officials together to try to see if there is a diplomatic solution while ramping up economic pressure and keeping all options on the table.
All right, Tara Mahler, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me.
All right, President Trump facing mounting criticism for inviting the controversial president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, to the White House. Duterte has been accused of numerous human rights violations for crackdowns in his country against drug users, journalists, and political opponents. Rich Edson, live from the State Department. Rich, he's getting bipartisan criticism right now?
Now, he is, Sandra. President Duterte is getting that criticism for essentially what they say is Trump's presidential endorsement of Duterte's conduct in the dangerous, deadly prosecution of that drug war in his country. The top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee says that President Trump should rescind that invitation.
It just sends the wrong signal. Here you have a leader that has authorized extrajudicial killings, who's violated the human rights of its own citizens, and the President of the United States welcoming him and giving him legitimacy. It challenges America's standing in regards to fighting on behalf of human rights and good governance.
Republican Senator John McCain just told Fox News in an interview that the Filipino leader was a dictator violating all basic human rights with extrajudicial killings. Now, the White House response to all this, and the State Department response to all this, is that the United States and the Philippines have a long-standing partnership and relationship, and they want to get together to discuss North Korea. Back to you.
All right, Rich Edson, thank you. Well, more trouble in the skies. This time, a fist fight between two passengers caught on camera. And another bruising battle playing out on Capitol Hill as well. Do the Republicans have the votes to push forward on health care? We will ask them.
After years of partisan bickering and gridlock, this bill is a clear win for the American people. Very importantly, there is no long-term bailout for the insurance companies.
Stocks took a nosedive along with the major markets, but the airlines slowly recovering. Stocks right now up about 15 points in late afternoon trading. For more on the financial fallout of all this, Fox Business Network's Lori Rothman joins us live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I always say, Lori, when it comes to stories like that, the investors' memories are short.
Right.
And they'll go back into a stock if they believe in the company. What are you seeing?
So here's the deal with the airlines today, Sandra. They're all higher, and especially with United Continental, which is seeing gains upwards of 3.5%. It's kind of surprising considering the grilling the CEO got on Capitol Hill. Why is that you think the stock would get hammered? Well, a couple of reasons. Delta reported strong earnings, so that is certainly helping. Revenue per passenger is up 1%, so that's great it bodes well for the entire industry. But with United Continental in particular, sorry, they're very busy here on the floor of the exchange today. But the CEO was apologetic, and he specifically outlined reform plans. You know, they're going to spend more perhaps on customer compensation, staff training. But there's also some concern here going forward that these costs added to higher labor costs and higher fuel costs could ultimately be a headwind for the airline industry. But as of today, the earnings, we're in the midst of the earnings season, and boy, they're coming in pretty strong. And so far with United, the bookings are holding up. Sandra, back to you.
All right, Lori Rothman on a busy floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you. All right, well, House Republican leaders are scrambling to shore up support for the health care bill. They've gotten members of the Freedom Caucus on board, but its fate is far from certain. President Trump urging members of Congress to push the bill across the finish line during an event earlier at the White House.
And how's health care coming, folks? How's it doing? All right, we're moving along. I think it's time now, right? Right? They know it's time.
Joining me now, two members of the Freedom Caucus, Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks and Virginia Congressman Dave Brat. Thanks to both of you for being here. Congressman Brat, I'll start with you first. Where is this going right now? You heard a very optimistic President Trump there in the Rose Garden earlier today, pushing this health care replacement plan.
Yeah, I think we've been within probably a handful of votes over the last couple of days, and I think they're working on it one by one. In conference today, pre-existing conditions is the one area there's a little uncertainty in some of the members' minds, but we have 3 layers of protection for that case, and so I think leadership's doing a good job educating everyone, and we're going to come out with a yes probably by Thursday, I hope.
Well, I want to go to Congressman Billy Long of Missouri, who he is a no at this point. And here's why he says he's a no. Listen. Oh, and I'm going to read what he said. Quote, I have always stated that one of the few good things about Obamacare is that people with pre-existing conditions could be covered. The MacArthur Amendment strips away any guarantee that pre-existing conditions would be covered and affordable. Congressman Brooks, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, pre-existing conditions is a tricky issue, and the way that we sought to resolve it is to defer that issue to the states to decide. In the absence of a state deciding that there will be no coverage of pre-existing conditions, or there might be some impact on the premiums associated with pre-existing conditions, the pre-existing condition law stays the same. So unless the state of Missouri tries to change it in some shape, form, or fashion, there will be no change from Obamacare to the American Health Care Act. So I'm a little bit puzzled by the comments of some of these congressmen who are not in support. Let me be real clear about a major amendment that was made that got my vote, and I think also got Congressman Bratt's vote. Without going into the details, the American Health Care Act, as originally introduced, according to the Congressional Budget Office, was going to increase health insurance costs, the premiums, 15 to 20% over the next 2 or 3 years, over and above the increase in costs of Obamacare. Now, with the amendment that we've been able to successfully put forth in conjunction with our brethren who are in the House Freedom Caucus, insurance premiums are projected to go down as much as 38%. That's a big change. That's a big difference, and that's what my people sent me to Washington, D.C. to try to do with health care costs.
So, Congressman Bratt, can I hear in your own words what brought you around?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big piece. We all ran, right? We wanted to repeal Obamacare. This isn't a repeal. It's still a federal government project. So we wanted to put in an amendment, like Congressman Brooks just said, to get the price down. Obamacare is the regulations, right? And so if you don't touch the regulations, premiums still go up by 30%. The average plan now costs a family of four $17,000. If prices keep going up 30% a year for 3 years, they'll double. That $17,000 will be $34,000 just for health care for your family. No one can deal with that. So we said we got to put something in to lower prices. We did, and that gets me to the yes. It's not ideal. The other thing that gets me to a yes is reconciliation ends in 25 days. And so if anyone's out there, I got grassroots friends at home, they're saying, Dave, why are you going along with this? Because in 25 days, we'll pivot to the Democrats to get an Obamacare bill, health care bill, and you won't like any of that. So we have 25 days to get it right, and this is our last chance to get prices down with 51 votes in the Senate, and so this is it.
Is this it, Congressman Brooks? I mean, what happens politically? What is the fallout if the GOP doesn't get this done?
Well, I think the Republican base justifiably ought to be upset with those congressmen that are not trying to repeal as much of Obamacare as we can. I heard an interesting quip from one of the Tuesday group members, that's the liberal wing of the Republican conference, and he proclaimed, look, the Tuesday group is totally for a repeal of Obamacare, except for the major parts. That's the situation we're in. I hope that they will keep their pledges to the American voters, that all Republicans will, and repeal as much of Obamacare as we can, given the limitations that we face on the vote count.
All right, Congressman Brooks, Congressman Bratt, thanks for stepping up to the camera for us.
You bet.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll keep watching it. What is it, by the way, with planes and people just behaving badly? An all-out brawl. Look at this, breaking out on a flight to L.A. twice. And yes, it was all caught on camera. All right, fistfights flying between two passengers on a flight from Japan to the United States. The violent encounter posted on Twitter showing two men fighting before takeoff, while an airline attendant sort of tries to break it up. One of them then went at it with a ticketing agent as he was taken off the plane then. This, of course, just the latest chaotic incident in a string of recent in-flight disturbances. Trace Gallagher live with more on this. Trace, what is going on?
Yeah, it's like, here we go again, Sandra. This was aboard an All Nippon Airways flight that was about to leave Tokyo for Los Angeles. Several witnesses say an American, you saw him there wearing the red Hawaiian T-shirt, appeared to be a bit intoxicated and was ranting about the government, though it's really unclear which government. After he gets to his seat, the video shows him abruptly turn around and tell a man in a gray shirt he's going to kill him, and then they go to blows. Watch.
Someone help! This guy's crazy!
You heard the kid in the background saying, stop, stop. After flight attendants intervened and tried to calm things down, the man in the gray T-shirt Says the guy in the red, you heard him, is crazy. The man taking the video is Corey Auer. He's a videographer in Phoenix. And when the guy in the Hawaiian shirt is escorted to the very front of the plane, the video keeps rolling and things appear to calm down. Then almost a minute later, back comes the guy in the Hawaiian shirt yelling something about America. And the fight resumes. This time a flight attendant gets caught in the back and forth. And that's when Corey Auer, the videographer, puts down his camera and tries to help out. Finally, the man in red is taken off the plane, but witnesses say once he got back to the gate, he choked an All Nippon employee and was arrested. The airline, which has been lauded for its top-notch customer service, released a statement saying, quote, All Nippon Airways apologizes to our passengers on Flight 6 to Los Angeles for the pre-flight incident. The individuals involved have been dealt with appropriately by local law enforcement, although we have not heard about anybody else except for the guy in the red being arrested. The plane took off maybe an hour and a half late. I have no idea what's going on, but the airlines are just kind of crazy. It's probably the cameras, right? Everybody's got a camera, so there you go.
Well, you know, the person shooting that remained calm. You know, his hand was steady, but unbelievable. Trace, thank you.
Sure.
All right, well, if you think riding a plane is bad, a bike may not be much better.